So we are going to discuss theories of race and ethnicity. So functionalism. So functionalists are going to view uh, racism in terms of how can this benefit society. And so racism morally justifies a racially unequal society. And so, for example, when we're talking about slavery and Jim Crow, is that this idea of racism justified slavery and eugenics. And so, scientists would be attempting to figure out and prove how the white race were superior and how the black race was inferior. And so they use different scientific ideas, theories, measurements, methods of trying to show evidence that black people are inferior white people. So they would measure the brain size, forehead, they'll weigh the brains, and a lot of other things justifying racism. The other aspect in how racism can be beneficial is essentially that racism contributes positively to creating strong bonds within groups and ostracizing out groups. So essentially, racism is a uniter for people. And so white people can unite around this idea of the white race. When we talk about how powerful the KKK and neo-Nazis have been, we can talk about how then thus that creates the othering of folks of color, right? And how that, but then the other side is that then it also bonds black people to unite together to fight racism and fight the KKK and etc. And so these bonds can be seen positively in this light. We have conflict theory. And so conflict theory analyzes many historical and present struggles between the white ruling class and racial and ethnic minorities. And so with conflict, they're looking at racial inequality and how it has benefited some people more than others. So we have intersectionality. So this argues that we cannot separate race, class, gender, sexual orientation, and other categories from our experiences and systematic oppression or privilege. And so what I have here is this identity wheel. In order to kind of understand intersectionality is my research interest, my field, my expertise, if you will. And so here you would write, what's your race, what's your ethnicity, your economic status, etc., go through. And so within each of these social categories in this wheel is that you'll either experience privilege because you're a part of the dominant culture, or you experience oppression because you're a minority within that group. And so, and that all of these experiences with privilege and oppression is going to shape who you are. And so then you can kind of think about, well, what identities do you think about most often? Which identities do you think about the least? Which ones would you like to learn more about? Which ones have the strongest effect of how you perceive yourself? Which ones has the strongest effects of how others perceive you? And so these are just things to think about. Of course, it's more complex than just race and ethnicity because we're talking about ability, age, religious or spiritual affiliation. But within all of these, either you're a part of the dominant culture and you're blind to it, you experience privilege, you don't have to think about it, or you're a minority and it's probably constantly on your mind. So these are just things to think about. The last theory is on interactionism. And so race and ethnicity proves as strong sources of identity. And so interactionism is going to look at how people form their identities because of race. How does race help in identity formation? Right? And so it's going to look at a question, how do people come up into their racial identity? Racial prejudice is formed through interactions between members of dominant groups. So if you were once followed in a store because of the color of your skin, then that's going to impact how you view particular people. It's going to impact your life. It's going to impact how you view yourself, etc. The culture of prejudice is how prejudice is embedded in our culture. And so prejudice is everywhere. We're going to see it everywhere. I mean, we can see it from lullabies to kids' movie to books to our language to sayings. It's just everywhere. And so it's just to be aware of um, where these ideas come from and how we interact, and then thus how it impacts our self identity. Okay, that wraps up this section. Bye.